My previous experience of Walton had been largely from fishing from the pier or from targeting bass at low tide from the reef at the Naze, so it's about time I gave one of the beaches a try. The main issue in summer though, as a large number of beach huts would suggest, is that the beaches can get quite busy. In this video you'll find me at Eastcliff Beach, not far from Hipkins Kiosk. The video is as much about managing your fishing when a beach gets busy as it is about catching the fish themselves. Some might say, why bother fishing during the day when you could possibly have the beach to yourself at night? I now much prefer to fish during the day, and as long as I take some precautions, then I can still have a good time, as long as I don't allow myself to get too distracted or wound up by other beach users. It must be remembered that most of our beaches are a shared space. As long as you're sensible, you can still catch in a safe and responsible manner. First thing to note is I much prefer to use a continental style setup, so there's no beasts of a rod, multipliers or pendulum casting here. Setting up with balanced tackle, utilising a fixable reel, wading into cast and using an overhead thump, in my opinion, is much safer. I'll quickly run through the locational details as I'm setting up my second rod. Walton is at the northeast end of the Tendring Peninsula, and the map shows some of the other local venues before zooming in on the area. Holland Haven and Frinton are to the southwest, and the Naze is at the northeast point. Harwich, with its Dovercourt Beach, is the next nearest venue. Zooming in closer, I'll point out some of Walton's other well-known marks before homing in on Eastcliff Beach. Eastcliff can be approached from Naze Park Road or Cliff Parade. This video covers 2 sessions in July at a mark in front of the public toilets at Eastcliff. The rig that I've already cast out is a 3-hook clip down version with short snoods. Here I'm baiting up what I refer to as a 2-snood sole rig. Before I attach and cast this one out, I'll also bait up a short boom rig. I'll keep that one on standby, hanging from my tripod. All of these rigs I'll make myself. If you're planning to make your own and not sure where to start, then I have got a series of tutorials on how to make these. I've put a link to the playlist in the top right hand corner and in the description below this video. This first session was at the beginning of July, and being outside of the school holidays, I was pleased to find that not too many people around. I've arrived a bit late, with the tide already an hour or so down. On a spring tide, the water comes right up the seawall, and that's probably the best time to arrive at this venue if you're expecting the beach to get crowded. Like most of the other tendering venues, it does fish better on the ebb, so that's why you need to arrive at the top of the tide before anyone else gets there. Once people are already positioned on the beach, your chance of fishing there is very much reduced. At high tide you can fish from the top of the seawall, at the railings, but as soon as people get on the beach, you'll have to stop fishing, because if it gets crowded they will sit in front of you and you won't be able to cast out. When it's crowded, you really need to be fishing as close to the water's edge as possible, and that's only practical when the tide is ebbing. People filling in the space between you and the sea wall will make it impossible to fish on a flooding tide. You'll have a problem moving your kit back without getting into any arguments. My main bait for today is ragworm, although I have got some lugworm with me as well. I'm clipping down my sole rig. The hooks on the lower snood are pennelled, with a size 3 and a size 10 above it. The top snood also has a size 3 Nordic bend hook. My ragworm is of good quality, being from Dean's Tackle in Clacton. Having just hung the rig from the tripod, I noticed a bite on a rod I've cast out. I rushed back quickly to strike, and I think I've connected. Well, that's a great start. A flatfish first cast. flounder of fairly decent size. Having returned the fish, we'll have a quick pan round the area and look at the tackle. So it's my familiar continental setup with 2 Colmic 07 rods and Pen Affinity 7000 reels. The reels are loaded with 30-pound braid, since at distance the seabed is quite rough. You're casting onto an undulating clay bed with plenty of gullies. There's a strong tidal pull from right to left, so the rigs have 6-ounce leads with wires. I want to cast my rigs at some distance, so a finger stall helps. Despite there not being many people about, it didn't take long for the first interaction with the general public. I don't think they're aware of the camera's presence, but I do welcome the chance to chat to people who have a friendly interest in what you're doing. However, at times I do have to stop filming if there are far too many people around. Although there was no issue with my lines just then, it would have been better if I was much closer to the water's edge. If there were more people about, I would have had to move my kit down towards the water's edge much quicker, and it's important not to have anything lying around that others might walk into or trip over. As you can see by those walking along behind me, there were a couple of groups of students down here taking beach measurements, so I did stop filming a few times during this session. It's a no-brainer to keep your rods raised off the beach as much as possible. You don't really want the sand in your reels in any case, but the last thing you want is anyone or any dog actually going into it. If there were more people about, then I wouldn't be baiting up this rig whilst leaving the other rod unattended. Time to switch over to the boom rig. Tidal pool's eased up a bit now, so I swap one of my leads over to a star lead which doesn't have any wires. If it doesn't hold bottom, then I'll just swap back over the next time I pull in. That's my first bite after that flounder. Unfortunately, something's got stuck in that clay bed. Unfortunately, I lost the fish as I was pulling the rig free. Next bite, and I think I've connected. Once again, the rig gets caught up. At low tide, when the clay is exposed, you know why. As well as being at very irregular hard ground, it also has weed growing on it. That does hinder the fishing here a little bit. Fortunately, this fish came out, but it's only a small schoolie. I get a bite whilst I was moving my gear down the beach, but unfortunately, the fish comes off. The weather's turned for the worst and it started to rain. At the peak of the summer, that can be good news because you know the beach is going to be cleared. Even though there's surprisingly few people here earlier, I pretty much have the beach to myself now until I pack up. Occasionally dropping a rig short sometimes works. Didn't take long for the next bite. And it's the first of 3 eels. And that's the second of 3 schoolies. Plenty of bites now, and this one's caught me on a hop. This eel needed disgorging. You can see in the far right that the clay bed has now started to be exposed. The bites eased off and I called it a day. It was a good start, but most of the bites came from halfway down the tide. Not the best of sessions, but there was enough action there to draw me back. My next session was towards the end of July and I arrived right at the top of the tide. When I got onto the beach, there was only one person there swimming. I set up nowhere near them, but it didn't take long for others to arrive. There were a couple of other anglers fishing from the seawall right in front of the toilet block. However, because the tide is now ebbing, I knew they wouldn't be there for too long. This time, the weather conditions were ideal for beach bathing, and I was just hoping that people would just give me some distance. I've opted for a long wire boom rig this time. First bite came when a large group of kids get in the water. I'm having to cast to my left as the kids start encroaching onto my area unsupervised. A few instructions and gestures were needed to move the kids out of the way. Didn't take long before a friendly discussion was needed with parents who had now turned up. I've replaced the audio to avoid them unnecessary embarrassment, but I did point out that I do film my sessions and it's what's going up on YouTube. Suffice to say that the shared nature of this beach didn't come to the forefront of their conversation. The other two anglers were still fishing from top of the sea wall. I did point out the dangers of going into the water when others are fishing. A few more suggestions and safety tips from me, unfortunately, initially went down a little bit like a lead balloon. All credit though to a woman who was sitting underneath a parasol on the seawall. She came over to have a word with his parents to tell them I was on the beach first and they're the ones that should be moving. At this point there was plenty of space to my left and that's the direction in which she pointed them to. I always try to avoid confrontation as it doesn't do anyone's blood pressure any good. It doesn't take much to compromise so that everyone can enjoy their surroundings. To be fair to this group, they did move to my left and even later on were quite interested in what I was doing. Neither of us interfered with each other's enjoyment and hopefully watching me catch a few fish and passing over a couple of crabs may have actually added to their experience. A few gentle reminders were still needed, but there was nothing there to put me off my fishing, and I still enjoyed the session. And more to the point, surprisingly, there were more fish coming out during this session than last time I fished here. This is the first of many schoolies that were caught during this session. Heightened awareness was obviously needed to ensure that safety was in place and that the good nature of the sport remains intact. That means being very careful when you're casting and ensuring that all fish are returned in good condition.
Yeah.
think this is schoolie number 4. Since the tidal pull has picked up and it's going from right to left, you may have noticed that I'm down to 1 rod. You don't want one of your rigs being dragged out of position and moving down to where there are swimmers. In any case, when you're getting plenty of bites, you don't really need to use 2 rods. Throughout this session, I'm sticking right to the water's edge and I'm making sure that all of my gear is compact. You may have noticed that people have moved in behind me on the beach, but there is no one swimming directly in front of me. I'm making sure that that doesn't happen. It is a bit of a pain moving my gear more often than I would have liked, but unfortunately that's what you've got to do if you want to carry on fishing under these conditions. Filming is also far more of a challenge, and I couldn't record much of this session for obvious reasons. For all the potential hazards though, focusing on the fishing still brings its rewards. Although, having said that, that's not much of a reward, but fortunately it was the only bootlace eel of the day. That's much better though. Although it's not very big, it is a flatfish. Not the sole I was hoping for, but I'll settle for this little flounder. think this is Scaldy number 7, closely followed by Scaldy number 8. So all in all, it was a pretty good day, with 1 flounder, 11 Scaldy bass and an eel. However, I did lose a few others, but all of that argy-bargy at the beginning was easily forgotten about.